again. And we now go to item 12. I think that's the way that's progressing as a consequence of the reshuffle. Call up Claire Gomez. So this is the approval of shareholder comments on Auckland Transport's draft statement of intent 2023 to 2026. And you'll recall that just a little while ago, end of April, in fact, 26th of April, we had a pretty extensive workshop on this matter. Feedback was captured at that workshop, and there was a facility for people to feedback after that. So hopefully we're getting very close to the end of this process now. Welcome, Claire and Alistair.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa. Let's move on. So, you are being asked today to approve the shareholder comments on Auckland Transport's draft statement of intent. The SOI responds to the letter of expectation and sets out AT's objectives and activities for the next 3 years with a focus on the next year. I'm briefly just going to outline where we are in the process, the feedback that we discussed at the workshop and from staff in the Independent Maori Statutory Board, and then what will be the next steps. So just as a reminder of where we are in the process, this slide kind of summarises that. You can see there with the yellow circle that this is the committee that's approving the shareholder feedback. Just noting that the letters of expectation were going out to the CCOs in December. It is quite a lengthy process. It does take 9 months from start to end. We did workshop feedback on the 26th of April, as the chair noted. And then after today, there are still parts of the process where the budget decisions are being made, and these may impact on the final SOI. So those dates are noted up there, notably the 8th of June. What happens after approval today is that the AT board will then, AT will go away, make their changes, present the final SOI to the AT board, and then that meeting must be in public. It'll be in June, and then we will receive the final SOIs for comment and feedback on that, or for adoption on the 31st of July. So just to recap on the workshop, at that workshop, just to note that officers had focused on and providing feedback to you on whether the SOI met its statutory requirements, met what was in the letter of expectation, and paragraph 24 of my report outlines what those key expectations were, how they're aligning to the group strategies and policies, annual budget considerations, and the CCO review template. We did provide a checklist at that workshop that set out the kind of sections and pages where AT had responded. I think it is important to note that AT has responded positively to the letter of expectations, but there are areas for further clarity and refinement, and that's what we'll discuss on the next few slides. And also to note that the report provides more detail than I'm just going to note. In the letter of expectations, we did provide some general comments that were made to all CCOs, and this slide is what was presented to the CCO Direction and Oversight Committee as well, so some of it should be familiar to many of you. But essentially there was an expectation, and what we are saying in the final SOIs is that we would like Auckland Transport and the other CCOs to report back and to reflect the annual budget decisions. That is why in the SOI, the draft SOI that you have, there are no financial data. It's because we have not yet agreed those budget decisions. We would also like the activity-based financial information to be provided in the final SOIs. The SOI should contain and outline what the CCO's relationship is with the Independent Maori Statutory Board, and refer to their schedules of significance, issues of significance, and plan as appropriate. What is common across all of the CCO's SOIs and our feedback is that we are expecting a bit more detailed information around the timeframes and the milestones, and I think this will become clearer through the budgeting process as well. The specific feedback, and these are at a theme level, to Auckland Transport, are around prioritising the recovery of the public transport services and committing to a public transport recovery plan, addressing the issues such as bus driver, ferry crew shortages, the rail network disruptions, bringing that together in a more coordinated way, and also improving the communication with existing and potential public transport customers. That's needed to improve confidence and increase the awareness of the available services that we're hoping are running. There are a number of comments that we were going to make around Auckland Transport's measures and targets, and we are actually saying that in the feedback that we are providing to them, is that we would like them to work more closely with council staff on this. And we actually do have a workshop scheduled with Auckland Transport to kind of work through some of that next week. They are proposing significant changes to their performance measures, and it's an area that we think requires a bit further work. We also would like to see more information in the final SOI around the Regional Land Transport Plan. This is a significant piece of work over the next year, and we have a much stronger desire to be involved and to get closer collaboration between Auckland Council and Auckland Transport in the formulation of this. We would like Auckland Transport to focus more on the Transport Emission Reductions Plan, taking advantage of the lower cost, more quickly implementable actions that are identified in that plan. Similarly, we think that there is a bit more clarity that could be provided around the road corridor improvements and the things like dynamic traffic lanes, mode share and project delivery. So we're seeking further clarity on that, and also around the road maintenance and renewal program. I think there is some information and context provided in the draft SOI around that and noting the financial constraints in that space, but there is a desire for them to be looking at more innovative approaches in that area and to consider the environmental as well as the whole of life financial costs. And then just to kind of conclude, the next steps are that staff will prepare a draft letter to send to Auckland Transport that will summarise and kind of make more detailed information in terms of what we're seeking in the final SOI. That will be reviewed by the Transport Chair and the Mayor and go from the Mayor. Given the time pressures and the statutory timelines that we do have to work through, we would hope to get that letter out to Auckland Transport next week. So that's it for me. I'm happy to take any further comments or answer any questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Claire, for that that presentation. Just to remind, one of the key points here that Claire brought up was that there is ongoing work with council staff to agree the measures and targets, including financial measures. So that will be taking place. We've been through a reasonably rigorous process ourselves here, and by the time you synthesise what we have gone out with in respect of the letter of expectation, the feedback with the key themes, the draft statement of intent from Auckland Transport itself, Claire is keeping a very close watch that everything has been captured and it's been reflected either in the measures or in the accompanying print. So it is pretty comprehensive. Okay, we've got a few questions coming up there. Councillors Darby, Brown, Dalton, Filipaina, Simpson and Walker.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Claire. Claire, look, it's a bit late in the piece, but sometimes it's events that prompt you to think about things that are missing. And I can't help but think that the Auckland Transport Network is, covers some 22% of urban Auckland's landmass, and it's largely impervious. And I'm getting to the point of my question, which is the impacts that the transport network has on the generation of stormwater and the quality of stormwater. So, Claire, I've just given you a heads up this morning on this. In a nutshell, is there a case at this point to insert a specific direction to Auckland Transport to address the impact of the transport network on stormwater generation and stormwater quality?
Thank you through the Chair. Look, through the draft SOI, Auckland Transport certainly note the challenges that they're facing with their asset renewal and maintenance program and the impacts of the storm events on these. I think there is probably potential to ask them to consider what those impacts are and to report back a bit more on that. It is a complex area with the 3 water reforms that are taking place, and I think there's certainly an expectation, or we could have an expectation to say, how are they going to work under those reforms, on those matters, and probably to actually think about doing this work and thinking about that will actually help them engage in a new entity should one take place. So I think there is potential in the letter to actually respond to that.
Okay, Chair, I might just leave it to you and the Mayor to pick that up. And we all know that the impervious surfaces continue to be created. Auckland Transport are pretty generous when it comes to designing things that are impervious rather than pervious. But I think in the narrative supporting this, I'm sure Claire, Mayor, and yourself can refine the words rather than dealing with them here.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Darby. I think that's been noted by Barry here. Mayor Brown.
Thanks very much for your work on this. It is a bit of a painful process, but we will get to the edge, and it is good that AT are listening and changing a bit. I think the draft statement is a step in the right direction, and I welcome acknowledge that they need to fundamentally change their approach as I requested and their commitment to saving money. Have more specific and measurable targets that demonstrate the tangible outcomes are required. I think you're working on that. So we've got to progress on simplifying temporary traffic management to reduce the numbers of unsightly cones, as well as charging contractors for parking to incentivise them to reduce the space they take up. And that somehow or other has to be in there. I am constantly driving them mad in there by pointing out places where they're forcing pedestrians onto streets just to avoid cones. I want ambitious progress on rolling out the dynamic lanes, and I think they're working on it, but I want to see that they're stating various streets. I want to have times on that. Another low cost, the bus transponders, other low cost work, so these improvements will be benefiting tens of thousands every day by the end of this financial year. Or the next. AT need to prioritise the recovery of the public transport services to quickly achieve pre-COVID levels, and I think that's in there, but I want to make absolutely sure you got it there. To do this, they need to have a transport recovery plan with milestones. And they need to ensure that communications with Auckland's on transport services will be drastically improved, both when disruptions occur as well as letting people and know what services are improving once they are. We had a mismatch between AT and Waka Kotahi last week on communications from the AEM. To give AT their due, they did apologise. Waka Kotahi have yet to. AT need to make progress on how they improve and maintain unsealed roads by learning from rural councils to the north and south who seem to do a much better job of it. And lastly, I want to see them raising parking prices to market levels. I don't know why we're subsidising people to park in the city centre. I know there's an issue with the parking fines, which we require government intervention ridiculously, and I've got that underway, and that's not helping because the parking fine is less than the parking charge in some places. Now, I've got a copy of those for you, but I just want to let you know that I think you're going quite well. They're going quite well, but these are some things that have to be there before John and I sign the damn thing off. Are you all right with that? Thank you.
Okay, you've captured that, Claire, thanks. Councillor Dalton online?
Yeah, thank you, John. I had 2 specifics as well, and one of them the Mayor's just mentioned. I wanted to know if we can prioritise the implementation of an increase in the parking fees to take place in the 23-24 annual plan. Clear. I don't know if we can get that specific, but it seems to me it's taking a long time. And this is an opportunity for us to increase those parking fees to market levels in the coming annual plan, please. And I have another one after this.
So thank you, Councillor Dalton, through the chair. So the section in the draft SOI on the value for money does highlight that work that Auckland Transport are proposing to undertake. We can, when we're saying that we want milestones and deliverables on that, we can kind of reiterate that that's a priority for us in our letter going back.
Okay. The second one, just around Auckland Transport working with council, and I specifically mean with staff. I'd like to see more of an emphasis or more of a priority for Auckland Transport to work with our growth transport and infrastructure strategy team on more things than just the RLTP. It will strengthen the advancement on the implementation of the TERP, but other work that we do often in silos and then come together, I'd like to see that relationship a lot stronger and knitted together. Can we word that into there, please? Because it's a time saver. It's a time saver in the grand scheme of things. Thank you.
Yes, I think we can do that.
Thank you, Councillor Dalton. Councillor Philippina?
Thank you, Chair. Always been a process person, Chair, and so I firstly want to, and I've looked at the recommendations that we have, and the interest is around B, having the Mayor and Chair of this committee be delegated the authority to finalise the shareholder feedback. If we go to the presentation and you got the what is next, I think, and you had the charts, I'm getting a wee bit sort of not confused, but I want to clarify. If you have a look at that AT Statement of Intent 23-26 timeline, 23 to 26 timeline. So, Chair, with the suggestions that you're getting now, and I'll ask both our presenters, what happens if what is being suggested now is something that is significant? Are we saying we'll leave that to you, Chair, and His Worship the Mayor to approve? I mean, I would rather, even if it's just to get that answer for that one, because somewhat of what I'm hearing now needs to be put into the statement of intent, even after the workshop, may be significant. So I just needed to sort of go through, Alistair, to yourselves first and see what happens with the issues that are being put in front of you to say, we need to do this and we need to put this into the statement of intent. Who makes the decision on whether it's significant or not? So I don't know.
I'll have a go at that. Through the chair, look, the point of today is to finalise the shareholder feedback, the shareholder being you collectively as members of the governing body. Now, as staff, we've put down what we think you conveyed to us at the earlier workshop that we've had. If there's anything additional to that we hear today, we as staff need to be confident that that is the view collectively of this committee. Now, in the past, because there's been a number of comments, we don't put everything up as an individual resolution, but if a comment is made by any of you to say, oh, could you please include that in the letter to go back to Auckland Transport, without doing a straw poll, we just need the sense from you or agreement from you collectively as a committee that that is something we should take on board and include in the letter that we will draft, which will ultimately be signed out by the Mayor and the Chair of this committee. The delegation to those two people is to sign out a letter that reflects the agreed feedback of this committee. We don't want to wordsmith it in this committee, but ultimately the letter must reflect the feedback that you agree. I hope that is clear.
It is, and Chair, supplementary to that, because again, this is important to me with suggestions that have been put forward by those on this committee. So as a result of what you've heard so far, and there's still going to be some councillors and independent Māori statutory board possibly yet to comment, with what you have heard so far, are there any, not concerns, but things that are significant with what people are asking to be added to the statement of intent? If it's not, I would want, moving forward, because I see the shaking of the head, moving forward, if there is any suggestion of something being put in, I would love to hear from both of you to say, look, this is significant, therefore then we need to make a decision around it. So if I can get that opportunity, Chair, just a comment to, well, when I say comment, the question to you is, what happens with the process from there?
So that's a good question, Councillor Filipaina. And what I have noticed with the feedback today and even the feedback earlier is that it's actually already encapsulated to a large degree in our feedback or in what Auckland Transport have come back to us with a statement of intent. So when I go to the commentary that Claire is making, often it's a refinement or an addition to a point, to a piece of feedback that has already been made. I guess what you're asking, and it's a very valid point, is if it is something markedly new or it's not captured to a greater or lesser extent in some of our feedback already, then that would be worthy of highlighting to the meeting, and I think that's a fair point to make. So I guess the other thing is that Claire certainly has her a view over this whole process, which it is quite a job of synthesising all the various bits and pieces here, but she assures me that it has all been captured, and when you go through the various attachments and that, you see that either in the print or in the kind of boxes, it is getting captured, and the purpose, I guess, largely of today, seeing we've been through the process, is hopefully just to pick up some refinements that aren't outliers, but if there is, as you say, then that should be made known.
And just a process question, last one, sorry, Chair. What happens then? It goes to Auckland Transport, the board. If they have any issues, it then comes back to us, or will that go back to, again, the Chair and His Worship the Mayor to make any calls? I just want to get the end process and then, yep, it's approved. That's all, because it doesn't say here.
Through the Chair, and first of all, rest assured we will shout out if a comment is made that we think is significant. The formal letter will go to Auckland Transport. Sometimes in the past, staff from various CCOs have approached our team for clarity as to what was intended by a comment. I think if that happened, we would give our view, or if it was slightly needed a bit more of a discussion, then it's probably a role for the chair and deputy chair of this committee as the group that formally signs off the feedback to perhaps clarify that. But generally by the time we get to sending a formal letter with shareholder feedback, hopefully things are getting clearer.
Thank you for indulgence, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Filipaina. Councillor Simpson, Walker, member, IMSB member James Brown, and Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Chair. In light of Councillor Filipaina's last question, I'm going to word my question very carefully. I know we discussed this at the workshop, but the recent rain emphasises the need to be nimble, the ability to mobilise and communicate effectively. Could we ask AT to prioritise not just projects, but also systems to ensure effectiveness in crisis situations? Because the reference to AT's approach to risk management in particular is there, but it's split into three things. So I want to help here. It's in Get the Basics Right on page 20. It's in with Challenges and Constraints on page 16. And it's in there under Sustainability and Environment. So my question is, could you tweak under one of those 3 points or all of the above, something to cover the prioritisation of systems to ensure effectiveness in crisis situations? Not anything new, Councillor Filipaina.
Look, I think if that's something that the committee is supporting, I think we can certainly include that in the letter to go back. They do make the comment around the investment and the projects and stuff, but there isn't, you're right, there isn't that sort of underlying theme coming through really that they are looking at these systems to address that sort of stuff. And I think given the recent events, that would be appropriate if everyone is in agreement.
So can I just ask one question to the councillors, Chair? Does anyone think that's not a bad idea? Right, okay, that looks like agreement, thank you.
Okay, so rather unusual way of doing things, but I think it's achieved the net result. Councillor Walker.
Sure, I've got a few things that I'd like to add by way of question, and I would suggest through you, Mr. Chair, that these are simply refinements. I really want to emphasise and endorse what the Mayor said about the cones and so on and the disruption. There is a mention minimising the impact of disruption on the network. That's under transport and access, and I agree with the Mayor, it's woefully inadequate. We've really got to labour that point. The other little tweak under, I think, opportunity and prosperity, it mentions I think things to do with work and leisure, but if we could add to that retail and education, because they are important needs of Aucklanders. Obviously, if people are able to shop locally, they're able to make a local trip, for example. And then the other thing that I just want to pick up on, and it goes further to Desley Simpson's comment about the storm. The realisation we have in Auckland is that many of our roads need to act as overland flow paths. This is the case in other cities that have torrential downpours like Singapore and the like. You could list a whole lot of them. And that really needs to be integrated into Auckland Transport's thinking. For example, a busway can be an overland flow path, for example, so that it's conducting water away and not causing flooding. So I just suggest that there's some refinement necessary, so it's top of mind. And the other comment that I'd make that maybe isn't in there is that there is a strong need for Auckland Transport to focus on disruption. The pace of change around electrification, the association of artificial intelligence, and particularly the related issue of full self-drive, is imminent. And when that happens, and it's just a matter of time, the disruption that will occur and the impact on public transport will be nothing short of substantial. So it's critical that we give that sort of advice to Auckland Transport so that they are planning. Otherwise, we could be making investment decisions that are woefully suboptimal. Thanks.
Okay, Member Brown.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Firstly, just to acknowledge the SOI's capturing of its relationship, particularly to the IMSB, in doing so. We're keen to get, if you were, the final draft SOI that's going out, obviously around how AT have considered the IMSB's issues of significance. That aside, one of the key recommendations in the Māori impact statement was what seems to be an appetite to make sure there's continued reporting of the Māori outcomes within AT's quarterly reporting. Just from a housekeeping perspective, Mr. Chair, we just want assurances that that'll be the case. Kia ora.
Thank you, Member Brown. Alistair, would you like to respond to Member Brown for that assurance he's asking?
Yes, that would be something we would look to continue to see reported through the quarterly reporting. And in addition to that, I understand there's separate reporting on progress towards the outcomes signalled in Kia ora Tamaki Makaurau that goes to the joint governing body IMSB Hui, but we would certainly look to continue it in quarterly reporting.
Okay.
Kia ora, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Member Brown. We go to Councillor Turner now.
The conversation has moved on considerably since I put my hand up, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to say that, you know, every bureaucrat I talk to tells me they want concise, short, you know, all our CCOs have all these conflicting things that they try to grapple with that we've put in their way. And what made me put my hand up is when I heard, you know, we were talking about charging more for car parks, and yet we're now taking car parks away. And so, you know, why we don't call the car park strategy room to make profit rather than room to move. I know it's out of step with even the process we're in now, but boy, we really need to try to clarify things and get it down to small, neat stuff that they can actually respond to. Yeah. Thank you.
Good point. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone that's been involved in getting the process to this point. My question perhaps could be to you, Mr. Chair, as well as the officers. Do you think, I mean, we've got the prioritisation of the recovery of Auckland's public transport to achieve pre-COVID-19 patronage levels, but do you feel that there are specifics and whether further measures should be put in place that can be used effectively? Do you think we've been strong enough in that particular area? And I'd really welcome just a little bit of feedback, and particularly in light of Councillor Filipaina's comments, I would rather put concerns that I have on the table now, so that if we need to see movement in that area, that the Mayor and the Chair can feel that they have the mandate of the councillors behind them on this.
Thank you. Look, I do think that's an area that we need to address with Auckland Transport around the measures, and it is why we have set up a workshop for next week. You know, they are proposing significant changes to the performance measurement framework, and it's not really clear at this point what has driven the changes and what they're wanting to report, what the methodology is. A number of them don't have any baselines, there's no targets, and so we are wanting to understand from them, you know, a bit more information around that, and then we want to be able to look at that and go, does that actually really meet the needs that we're asking in the direction that's being given in that respect? And I think that that's an ongoing conversation that's going to take, you know, a few sessions to work through, and then hopefully when we get the final back, and you know, we've got a lot more comfort around the measures.
Well, yes, I think I'm comfortable with the notion of, you know, the council staff working to agree some of the more precise measures and targets. When you certainly look at the combination of the paper before us today and AT's response, the draft statement of intent, it is pretty comprehensive, and the direction of travel is very clear. If you do nothing else but read the opening statement from the chairman, it is a pretty remarkable signal as to the direction AT will be taking from here on, and you know, one that will meet with huge support around here. So yeah, I'm satisfied with the way things are going, Councillor Fletcher.
That's good to know. The second area that I feel I would like to see perhaps strengthened is in the communication with the wider Auckland public, and I wonder whether that will also be the opportunity with the workshop that we can actually do a bit of a deep dive into to further strengthen. Is there any comment that you would wish to make on that?
Sorry, Councillor Fletcher, with the workshop, the measures workshop. That wasn't specifically to look at communication and the program. We do acknowledge in the point that we are expecting to see improvements in the communications plan and how that works with a passenger transport recovery plan. Are you talking specifically about a measure in relation to that communication? That's something we could certainly address in that workshop, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. I'm a little bit nervous, I guess, about the lack of mention of climate and action in that space, because obviously transport emissions are a huge part of Auckland's total emissions. In particular, the opportunity under part 2 around the second part, getting the basics right. There's a number of aspects there where we could quite easily put in something that was explicit about climate. So, for example, in the second one, reprioritise the capital program. We've got there prioritise weather event recovery projects, asset management, blah, blah, blah. We could quite easily put in there something about, you know, acknowledging that we need to prioritise projects that will reduce emissions. So that's something I'd like to see more strongly reflected in the document, is acknowledging that the climate role is actually part of getting the basics right. So, yeah, any suggestions in that space about how we could give that feedback and get that better reflected in the final? Thanks.
Through the chair, paragraph 29 of our report does say that we want them to be stronger in that area, and we would include that point in the letter. It is part of our recommendation.
Okay, thanks. So that finishes off the questions, Duncan. It does, and I don't know if there's any comment. Is there?
I'm happy to move.
Okay, so it's moved by Councillor Fletcher, seconded by Councillor Simpson. We have one speaker to it, Councillor Newman.
Oh, look, Chair, I just wanted to, if I may, and I really appreciate what Ken Turner said about the conflicting nature of this council. It's a real challenge for me, and I'm sure it's a real challenge for Auckland Transport and to many of my constituents. And if I may, Chair, I just want to say, look, I think the shareholder, we're struggling to decouple the reality of Auckland Transport's financial position, where they're getting limited funding, including limited funding from their Wakatai subsidy to address asset renewals, as well as recovery following extreme weather, versus, you know, I really appreciate that some people really aspire to drive forward with to move forward with the whole climate space around TERP, which a lot of which is quite unfunded. So I do have some sympathy for Auckland Transport insofar as every time we are wanting to capture in documents such as an SOI the requirement for them to meet financial KPIs, including, you know, the implementation of unfunded activities, they will try and do their best, but I worry that we set them up to fail. And the only thing that will happen there is that the shareholder will be disappointed. Secondly, Chair, I do think that we need to cut Auckland Transport some slack. I think they genuinely are starting to try and do more with less. I think their parking strategy that they came back to us with is way better than what they pitched before the election. And so credit to, you know, the senior management of the Board of AT on that. And finally, Chair, I just think that I accept that we want to be aspirational, but we need to be mindful of the fact that the forward projections from the budget for whatever budget we adopt next month, are going to require us to revisit the transport capex program with AT in the long-term plan. We've got a new transport integrated transport plan coming, I'm sure. We'll have a new government policy statement on land transport, quite possibly quite a radical new GPS at the end of the year. And Auckland Transport have already signalled to us that their forward capex is going to need to be based on asset renewals, which is funded through rates. And that means a more conventional role for Auckland Transport in the future. and that will need to be expressed in the long-term plan. So, Chair, in supporting this, I think that the SOI can't be a blue skies exercise. This is an SOI for the times, and we're in a very capital constrained environment where it will be recovery, which is at the heart of Auckland Transport's role and function. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. Councillor Fletcher, you wanted to make a comment?
Well, actually, it's not a comment. It's to a degree going back to questions, and that is I've just reading parts of the budget where there are 327 million for free public transport for primary school aged children, half price public transport for under 25s from the 1st of July this year, benefiting about 774,000 people, and pay rises for bus drivers. Just by the time we have our workshop, can this information be massaged into what our expectations are and where our responsibilities might fall? Will there be that level of information available by then?
So through the chair, look, the workshop that we're having staff to staff with AT next week is really trying to understand the measures that are proposed in the methodology and how it aligns with the intervention logic. We probably will need another 1 or 2 sessions after that to agree some of the measures. And I think by that point, hopefully we will have some of the outcomes from the budget decisions and can help inform that a bit more. Does that,
right.
Thank you.
I think I'd just add to that there's not only the information from the annual plan, but also central government's budget and how that, and I think that might be what you're referring to here. I'm trying to think how to say this politely and struggling. I'm never sure how quickly we get clarity out of central government, but as soon as we get some clarity as to how much of that funding and how that any conditions around its use, then I think we can ask Auckland Transport to incorporate that into their statement of intent.
I think you've said it with great diplomacy. I guess my comments are really, and questions are following on from the comments made by Councillor Newman. I do believe that Auckland Transport are making a significant change, and there is a change in attitude, but I don't want to see us burden them with expectations that are created out of the budget where we're not really sure where funding responsibility might sit.
All right, okay. Thank you, Alistair and Claire. I should have actually asked you to move back, but it's been a rather unusual item this way, in one way or another. I'll very quickly myself finish off with a comment to finish off this debate, if we can call it that, and it really goes to some of the matters that have been brought up by both Councillor Fletcher and Newman in their comments. If you look through the Auckland Transport's response and their draft statement of intent, I think they do make a point of putting on the record some of these provisos or caveats, if you like, in respect of budgets and approved funding. So I think we definitely do need to recognise the fact that that it is a very unusual environment we've moved out on, and in fact that we're still in, and that is going to have an effect. We can't just merely soldier on under the expectation that the current environment doesn't affect some of these things we're asking them to do. And in that respect, I think they've been quite helpful themselves. If I look at the point to do with parking, for instance, one of the points they make in their response is to establish a program to identify and realise opportunities to implement or increase AT charges for the services we provide where these are currently undercharged. So I think we certainly need to listen to AT too. Certainly at the sale of one of the proposed sale of the downtown car park, there was quite an extensive research piece from AT presented going to parking charges and the equity issue that AT were very nobly pursuing in the respect of actually making parking accessible to the people that come into Auckland City. So I think we do need, and we do in this, give the opportunity to be informed by AT, because in some instances it's not quite as black and white as we think. There are other bigger issues involved in this case, not least of which would be conceivably pricing the city centre out of suburban commuters or visitors. So I think they have identified that. So it's been moved, it's been seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. And I think that's that item. So we now go to the final part of the meeting.